Dear Commissioner, welcome to Copenhagen. And thank you very much for your hard work over the last year as Commissioner. You have really made your mark on the European research and innovation landscape. So just allow me in this ESOF setting to mention a milestone in your work. First and foremost, in the long line of remarkable contributions is, of course, Horizon 2020. In a time of financial constraint and austerity, and when other policy areas in the EU budget were subject to cuts, you still made it possible to increase the budget of research and innovation. A 30% increase in real terms from FP7 to Horizon 2020 is a fantastic achievement. And although your fellow countryman, the well-known writer George Bernard Shaw, said, "Science never solves a problem without creating 10 more," I know we share the conviction that research and innovation are key drivers for European growth. No doubt that the increased budget to Horizon 2020 will help Europe move forward. Horizon 2020 has marked a change from previous framework programs. The primary agenda of the framework program is now growth, job creation, and societal challenges. Europe's agenda is Denmark's agenda, and I highly appreciate the fact that you have helped put this at the top of the agenda of Europe. In my ministry, we really appreciate the good cooperation we had with the Commission during the Danish EU presidency, and together we managed to lay the foundations for the rest of the negotiations of Horizon 2020. However, we must not only linger on what we have attained. In our research and innovation policy, we must reap the benefits of the technological developments such as digitalization and globalization. In Denmark, we will continue to prioritize investing at least 3% of GDP in research and development. We will also continue to focus on growth and job creation and societal challenges. The fact that we have common agendas on the European and national levels will certainly help achieve our goals. And only if we work together will we achieve our common ambitions, that is, the entire idea of Europe. So I will now give the floor to Commissioner Máire Geoghegan-Quinn. I look very much forward to hearing your thoughts on the future of research and innovation policy in Europe. Welcome once again.
Áire agus a riúis le bhile mar dúsará go bhfuil anáchas ar a bhein seo ag ócáid chu tábhachtach le ESOF agus go bhfuil súlagam go méid seachtain gan sco agus tinól gan sco agaí seo at Copenhagen. Minister Nielsen, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here. It's now nearly 2 years since I addressed the ESOF conference in Dublin, and that speech came at precisely the halfway point of my 5-year mandate as European Commissioner for Research, Innovation and Science. Speaking then to the ESOF plenary gave me a chance to articulate my very firm belief in science as the basis for better lives and a better economy. I also talked about the European Commission's plans to reform how we finance research and innovation, and the need to invest more in the best science, even with severe pressure on the EU budget. And I spoke, as the Minister said, about putting research at the heart of EU policy making. 2 years on, I believe that we have delivered on that agenda, with the biggest achievement being Horizon 2020, which will invest nearly €80 billion in research and innovation between now and 2020. Of course, it hasn't all been plain sailing, far from it. It has been a long and sometimes difficult process to get to where we are today. When I became the European Commissioner in 2010, research and innovation were not discussed at the European Council as often as they deserved. I have to thank my colleagues in the research and innovation families in the European Commission for working together to push these issues further up the political agenda. And I also wish to applaud the research community for making its case so cogently and persuasively. I'd like to take a moment this morning to tell you a story about just how forceful scientists can be. One of the most exciting events at the beginning of my mandate was attending my first Nobel Prize ceremony in December 2010. It's certainly the biggest event in the scientific calendar, with the exception of ESOF, of course. The gala banquet was a huge and lavish affair with over 2,000 people in the magnificent setting of Stockholm City Hall, a jewel, as we know, of Sweden's national romantic architecture. I was, of course, very excited at the prospect of meeting so many leading scientists, and I was also very proud that one of the two laureates for physics, Konstantin Novoselov, had previously been funded by the ERC. But my enjoyment was short-lived. In his acceptance speech, the physics co-laureate, André Geim, dropped a bombshell, launching a bitter attack on excessive bureaucracy in EU research funding. The entire room, bar one, me, applauded, so you can imagine how I felt. I wanted a hole in the ground to open up and swallow me. However, I decided to turn a negative into a positive, and this experience only strengthened my resolve to tackle the problems, to simplify the funding and provide the very best conditions in Europe for excellent science and innovation. The landscape has changed hugely since 2010. Research and innovation are at the heart of the Europe 2020 programme, and heads of state and government have had 2 thematic discussions on these topics in the European Council. This new political emphasis has been crucial in delivering our agenda. The increase in funding for Horizon 2020 is proof of member states' immense trust in the scientific community, trust that you will play a major role, if not the role, in boosting growth and jobs, and trust that you will help us find the answers to the biggest challenges faced by society. For me, an excellent example of science's engagement with real-life problems is the work of the European and Developing Countries Clinical Trials Partnership that I saw firsthand in South Africa in 2012, where European member states are working with their African partners to tackle tuberculosis, malaria, and HIV/AIDS. More recently, I had the chance to visit CERN and learn from the scientists themselves how they are pushing forward our knowledge of the fundamental questions in physics, life, the universe, and everything, no less. Indeed, it has been a privilege for me to meet and work with many leading scientists from around the world. But I've also been very inspired by meeting trailblazers, like the winners of the European Union Women Innovators Prize, young researchers boosting their careers with ERC starting grants, and the very youngest scientists in our schools and colleges, the Generation Z teenagers who are determined to change the world through science. If I'm sounding at this stage a little nostalgic about my time in the European Commission, it could be because it is only a few months until the end of my mandate. But I don't want to dwell on the past, and I'm certainly not slowing up just yet. Just 2 weeks ago, I launched with Vice President Olli Rehn a communication on research and innovation as sources of renewed growth. It underlines the importance of investing in research and innovation as the basis for competitiveness, growth, and jobs. The communication also sets out the priority reforms to ensure that public investments get the best value for taxpayers' money. It will be discussed by both the research ministers and finance ministers in the autumn. And today, I want to take this opportunity to look forward to potentially far-reaching changes in the way we do science and research. Predicting such paradigm shifts can be a dangerous business. Many of the technological and social forecasts from 40 or 50 years ago have proved to be way off target. So it might be a bit risky to suggest that researchers' modus operandi is on the brink of radical change. However, it can't be denied that we're seeing a transformation in how science is organised and how research is performed. This transformation is being driven by digital technologies, the globalisation of the scientific community, the demand for more responsive science, and by the need to address urgently the complex societal challenges of our times. I am not a scientist, but as a politician, I am positively evangelical about the power of science to improve and enrich our lives and to sustain our economy. So I'm fascinated to see the possible impacts of new developments. New developments such as citizen science, which can enrich research efforts with bottom-up input, or open data, which provides the transparency and reproducibility of research, or open access, which is putting research results into the hands of more people who can use them, or alternative metrics that could help measure the impact of research in a much more comprehensive way, while data-intensive science would enable the social sciences and humanities to tackle a whole new range of issues. Because of the holistic impact of these and other trends, Science 2.0 is the commonly used label to describe them, but many other terms can describe the overall concept, such as open science, digital science, and networked science. This opening up could affect every step in the research circle, from agenda setting and the inception of research, to how it is performed, to how findings are published, and how the results are used and by whom. It could also affect how we evaluate the quality and impact of research, and it might affect how we assess scientific integrity and risk. It will also affect who is involved in the production and the use of knowledge. Of course, it is scientists, first and foremost, who will be most affected. The changes are coming from the bottom up, led by scientists themselves. You are the ones that are pushing forward and who are best placed to see the benefits and the potential problems. The scientific community is self-organising in nature, and it is certainly not the role of the policymakers to step in and tell you what to do. But we as policymakers at European level need a better understanding of the dynamics of Science 2.0 and its possible impacts on science and research policy in particular. We want to discuss with the wider public whether we have identified the key drivers and constraints, the incentives, and the benefits. And that is why we will launch within the next 2 weeks a wide-ranging public consultation to increase awareness of the issues, to understand the views and concerns of everyone involved, and to fine-tune our own analysis. This consultation is important because Science 2.0 is happening now, and we need to be better prepared for it than we were for Web 2.0. Though we had all the players in place, we were caught by surprise and lost our leading role in areas such as mobile communications. I think it's a very telling comparison. User-generated content, such as the social media and blogging of Web 2.0, have transformed people's ability not just to find information online, but to edit, to publish, to share, and to collaborate. Far more people became not just users of information, but creators of new content. The same will be true for scientists, for scientific data and research. Science 2.0 is beginning to thrive, thanks to its users, and without any top-down interference. We must ensure that creativity and entrepreneurship are not stifled. But we would be failing as policymakers if we did not discuss with you whether any policy intervention is needed or desirable in order to remove barriers and actively encourage these new developments. And let's not forget that since around 35% of research investment in the EU is public money, public sector funders, including the European Commission, also have a stake in the new developments. It's our job to get the best value for money and the biggest impacts from the public money invested in research. And we have a responsibility to see that the research results are used for the greater good of the economy and society at large. I'm counting on you to take part in the public consultation, so let me now discuss the issues that it will address. Science 2.0 is a huge and wide-ranging concept. I think it helps to group the issues around several themes. At its simplest, we can think of it as more sharing, more people, and more data. First of all, more sharing concerns the explosion in the amount of research being produced. Digital technologies are also changing how scientists collaborate and how and when they publish, with implications for how careers in research are evaluated. The second theme is more people. This refers to the growth in the number of people producing science, not just research professionals, but also the non-scientists who are getting involved in the research process and improving its quality and its relevance to society. Thirdly, more data refers to the possibilities opened up by new data-intensive ways of performing research. So let's consider, first of all, the impacts of more sharing on scientific production. It's a cliche, but it's true. The internet is transforming society. We now have a generation of digital natives who are living and working online, indeed sharing their lives online, and they're by no means the only ones. The internet and digital technologies are already changing how research is done, from the collection of data to how scientists collaborate to how they publish their results. These technologies mean that a truly global scientific community can develop, collaborating more easily in a particular field or working together on a complex societal challenge. It will also be easier to access specialist expertise to tackle very specific problems. And alongside greater collaboration, we're now seeing a trend towards greater openness in the research process, from open research collaboration to open access to the results of research and scientific data. We have already seen this, for example, with the Human Genome Project, where scientists shared data prior to publishing, or even refrained from publishing in order to map the genome as quickly as possible. Science 2.0 also has the potential to improve the scientific methods by letting researchers share and verify data and findings at an early stage before they publish, for example, through sites like ResearchGate and Mendeley. On the one hand, this could mean writing erroneously and making mistakes publicly. On the other, sharing information on failures can help others to avoid dead ends and redirect research into more promising areas. It can also make the whole scientific process more transparent. Researchers are also using dedicated social media to connect and share information. Nearly 9 million academics have joined the US-based academia platform to share their research, monitor its impact, and follow the work of colleagues. Vice President Cruz and I have been very supportive of the trend towards more openness in the research system. New approaches are addressing thorny issues such as the slowness of the publication process, many researchers' frustration with the dominance of peer review, and the challenge of replicating research results. A recent independent study produced for the European Commission showed that the global shift to open access to research publications has reached a tipping point. Around 50% of scientific papers published across nearly 40 countries in 2011 are now available for free. Clearly, open access is here to stay. Making research results more available contributes to better and more efficient science, stimulates innovation, and strengthens our knowledge-based economy. This is why we have made open access to peer-reviewed publications the default position across Horizon 2020. More recently, we launched a limited pilot on open research data in selected areas of Horizon 2020. It aims to improve and maximise access to and reuse of research data generated by projects. However, we recognise that there may be good reasons not to make data openly available: to protect IPR in order to develop a product, for reasons of privacy, data protection, confidentiality, or national security, or to ensure that the main goals of the project aren't jeopardised. I know how important the issue of data protection is to scientists. The Commission proposed a nuanced approach that was acceptable to the scientific community. In my view, we struck the right balance between privacy of personal data and its use for the greater good in research. These are just some of the trends that will have major implications for the current system. And let's not forget that even if technologies permit new ways of working, they will only be taken up if there are enough incentives to do so. That's why we need to consider the possible impact of these developments on scientists' careers. The most important way for a researcher to establish his or her reputation is through peer-reviewed publication in journals, the idea being that you either publish or perish. However, as discussions in several member states have demonstrated, some scientists consider that the system is too limited. That is why we are seeing the development of metrics that underpin alternative reputation systems. I'm thinking, for example, of ResearchGate's impact factor, altmetric.com, or impact story. These all take into account the impact of scientific documents in social media. The advent of Science 2.0 may indeed herald changes to reputation systems, but in my view, their main aim must remain to identify and reward excellent people and excellent work. Like any big change to well-established practices, there will be some uncertainties. But we can navigate these changes if we stick to a number of tried and tested standards. In my view, there should be no concessions on excellence. And the way we establish this is through peer review. In a world of abundant knowledge, it might become even more important than before. However, new ways of determining quality could enhance the peer review process and give researchers a richer evaluation of their work. Nonetheless, as our global scientific system becomes more responsive to the grand challenges, scientific excellence and impact could increasingly be assessed together. This brings me to the second trend that I want to discuss: the increase in the number of people participating, whether performing research or addressed by it, or simply curious about finding out more. The number of scientific institutions is growing rapidly, not just in Europe, but across the world. At the same time, the number of students is rocketing. According to a World Bank report last year, for instance, the number of college graduates in China alone could swell by 200 million over the next 2 decades. With the huge growth in the number of scientists, so research output is growing exponentially. And Science 2.0 is also making it easier for other people to get involved in the production of science. Citizen science refers to the collaboration between professional scientists and citizens, usually people who have a particular stake in the outcome of the research. Citizens and civil society organisations are all also getting involved in raising funds and setting agendas. Patient groups are helping to fund and inform research on specific diseases. New financing is coming from philanthropic organisations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and increasingly via crowdfunding. This direct involvement of stakeholders, together with scientists' ability to communicate directly with the public through blogs and social media, reflect a wider trend of embedding science in society. We've already seen how new media have revolutionised public and political discourse in other areas, and now they are democratising science. This raises many questions. Does this mean that we're moving from a long-established system of a happy few to a more open republic of knowledge? If so, what are the expectations on each side? How can we ensure that citizen involvement is not simply a resource to be used by researchers to enrich their data, but in fact a two-way street with citizens also taking part in the research process and more broadly giving their views on the direction that research agendas could take? Science 2.0 has the potential to open everything up as regards involving the public in the scientific process. Tools like the Citizen Science Alliance Zooniverse portal are already demonstrating how thousands of people can be involved in conducting the research themselves in areas as diverse as astronomy, ecology, or climate science. Getting more citizens involved in science can only be a good thing, and they can contribute not just to the research itself, but also to determining priorities. For example, the Voices project, financed by the EU under the 7th Framework Programme for Research, brought citizens and scientists together to discuss and set research agendas, and has fed directly into the definition of topics in the first Horizon 2020 work programme. Or take some time to discover the EU-supported Scientize project, which is presenting its work here at ESOF. They're using digital tools to get thousands of people participating in research, for example, by asking them to report if they catch flu in order to monitor outbreaks and predict possible epidemics. Initiatives like these are very good ways to involve citizens in science. It's an important element in developing responsible research and innovation that meets the needs and the expectations of wider society. Policymakers, industry, and citizens are relying on science to deliver and to provide the insights and information on which decisions can be made, and they demand accountability and transparency. A major factor in the reliability of research is the quality and availability of data. This brings me to the third and final theme that I want to examine: data-intensive science. In 2013, the research organisation SINTEF reported that 90% of all the data in the world had been generated over the previous 2 years. Digital technologies are both creating more data and giving us the tools to make sense of it. This has huge implications, not just for the scientific method, but also for the economy. Big and open data can be an engine of growth. They have been estimated to potentially add 1.9% to the EU's GDP by 2020. The gains can be derived from productivity increases, the opening up of public sector data, and better decision-making thanks to data-driven processes. Text and data mining, using computers to discover and extract knowledge from unstructured data, also has huge economic potential due to labour productivity gains. But the more exciting prospect for us is TDM's contribution to better science. Data-driven science can pick up correlations and spot the significant patterns and information in a sea of information. And it will make data itself citable, not just the resulting research, so someone gets credit for their data when it is reused elsewhere. You will certainly be aware of the discussions over the last 2 years on text and data mining. My colleagues and I in the European Commission are keenly aware of your concerns. There is a growing sense amongst policymakers that the status quo is no longer an option, not least because our competitors outside the EU are moving on. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe has been the birthplace of the great scientific transformations, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and the Industrial Revolution. We must ensure that we are at the forefront of the next paradigm shift. The European Union has a real chance to become a global leader here. I can say this with confidence because we're already pioneers in so many areas. European scientific publishers are leading experiments in open and data-intensive services. Mendeley and ResearchGate, both based in Europe, are already global players in social networking for scientists. Research funding bodies such as the Wellcome Trust, the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, and the European Commission are promoting open access policies, while some of the leading citizen science initiatives have originated here. At European level, we urgently need a better understanding of the current changes and how people view them. So we hope that this wide public consultation will trigger a Europe-wide debate. Our online consultation will be launched very soon. It will be based on a paper setting out the issues and will remain open until the end of September. Then the European Commission will sort and analyse the data prior to discussing the results with stakeholders in a series of workshops in the autumn. Those discussions will then feed into a paper on policy implications that the Commission aims to publish by the end of the year. I can't prejudge what position the European Commission will take, nor whether it will decide that policy interventions are necessary or useful. But I can tell you that the Directorate General for Research and Innovation and the Commission's Joint Research Centre are planning to set up a monitoring system to gather systematic data on the constantly evolving trends and drivers and impacts. And I can also guarantee that you as scientists will continue to have the European Commission's full support for your work. Let me be very clear. Neither I, my services, nor the European Commission have any predetermined agenda here. We're holding this consultation to make sure we do the right thing as policymakers, and we're waiting for the results before we take any decisions. And doing the right thing can also mean doing nothing. You have to let us know if that's the best policy. And that brings me to my last word. If you're not crazy about the term Science 2.0, the last part of the consultation lets you suggest a better name. But whatever term we prefer, there is no doubt that we are on the brink of some very interesting and important changes. Changes that I hope will strengthen and enhance the practice of science and that will cement its role at the heart of our society. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, for your participation in Copenhagen today, but also for your support of ESOF more widely. You mentioned that you gave your talk in Dublin, and it's been wonderful as someone who's been involved in ESOF to have your support these last few years. And one of the things that I like particularly about ESOF is that it manages to attract senior politicians and policymakers like yourselves, and also very top scientists, but also a large majority of young, energetic, young scientists. And I think that's what gives ESOF its really vibrant feeling, having that interaction between the two. So my first question to you, Commissioner, is what advice would you give to young people setting out on their career in science today?
Well, I've been talking since 2010 to young people at all different levels, whether they are in primary school, in secondary school, or indeed in college. I've also been talking to parents' associations and saying, this is if you want to get a really good job that is highly paid, highly skilled, and importantly sustainable, then science and innovation is the area that you need to study. And we have seen a change. When we had a very vibrant economy that was growing at an enormous rate, every parent wanted his or her son or daughter to be involved in the financial industry. Now, we know what happened to that industry. So we want to avoid that happening again, and we want to make sure that these jobs that the education that they get trains them for the kind of jobs that are available. I had a very, very interesting, we had the second innovation convention in Brussels in March of this year. And one of the things that my staff talked me into doing, which was very risky, at the very beginning, the first session of the convention was what was called Generation Z, where a group of young people from 14 up to 22 sat around with me and debated education, debated what they had done themselves. Now, a 14-year-old, all of the group had developed various research projects. A number of them had a number of companies, and one 14-year-old had already under his belt 2 companies. And I was saying, you know, what message do you give to a policymaker or to a minister for education? And they all said the same thing. They said, first of all, we're being educated in a lot of areas by rote. We're not being encouraged to think outside the box. And if, as all of us, and each of them said it, you know, did something different, both our parents and our teachers were concerned at why we were spending so much time in front of a computer, not realizing that they were creating, you know, content, and they were very successful, and that, you know, a lot of major companies were interested in what they were doing. They also said that education was training them and teaching them to become employers, and that education needed to look at training young people employees, and that education needed to change to train them to be employers. So I think my advice is STEM education is very important. These are the areas that are very important for the future. You can be a scientist, you can work in the public sector, you can work in the private sector, you can travel, but at the end of the day, these jobs are highly skilled, highly paid, and sustainable. So I would encourage young people to get into this area.
And there's also a little bit of advice there, I think, for all of us, which is to listen to the voices of young people.
Exactly. Well, that's what they said to me, and perhaps Sophie and other ministers for education will get an opportunity to have a similar Generation Z debate. It was challenging, very risky, but I think at the end of the day, it was well worthwhile.
Excellent. So on the same subject, we have a number of high school students participating in ESOF today, well, actually throughout the whole of the week. And they're part of the ESOF Future Academy, and we have 3 members of the Academy in the audience who have their own questions to ask. So I'd like to hand the floor to them to ask their questions.
Hello, I'm Lærke, and I come from Future Academy, and I have 3 questions for you. The first one is, what exactly do you mean by scientific revolution?
Well, I think it's not that I'm asking people to engage in a revolution, but I think the revolution is actually happening. And we have a decision to make as Europeans. Are we going to lead this? Are we going to be in the lead? Or are we once more, like happened with Web 2.0, are we going to miss out? And I think for young people, for scientists, For the economy as a whole, it is important that Europe is central to this particular revolution. If you look at what has happened, as I said in my speech, on the technology side, how science is being communicated now, how scientists are working together, how information is being gathered and shared and all of that, that's a revolution. If you look back a couple of years ago to the way science was done then. So for me, the revolution is here. We, the scientists here, not me, but the scientists here, need to decide, are we going to lead this revolution or are we going to be left behind? And I hope they vote the first way.
Thank you. The next one is, why is it necessary to have a scientific revolution?
Well, I think again, we have an economy in Europe which is struggling to gain competitiveness in most of our member states. If we look at the policies that will create the competitiveness, out of which will come growth, which delivers jobs to our people, then the part of the policy in every single member state that's going to do that is research and innovation. And I mentioned in the speech again that just a couple of weeks ago, Vice President Wren, who's responsible for economic policy in the Commission, and I produced a communication, it's really a paper for discussion, where we laid out the reasons why it is important for ministers, prime ministers, to invest in research and innovation for competitiveness, but very importantly for jobs, which we need very badly.
Thank you. The last, why is it Europe's job to have this scientific revolution?
Well, again, a little bit like what I said in response to your first question, I think it's a question, not for me, but I think it's a question for the scientists. Where do you see yourself? Where do you want to be? How do you want your research to be presented, shared, and so on? And if you want to be, as I believe European scientists want to be, the leader, a global leader in this whole area, then the choice is that you have to be part of this revolution and you have to lead it. But again, that's not a matter for me or for the policymakers, I would suggest. I think that's a matter for the science and research community. And I've gotten to know quite a substantial number of that community over the last 5 years. And in my mind, they want to be in first place. They don't want to be followers, they want to be leaders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we have some time to open the questions to the floor. We have some roving microphones. So if you'd like to have a question, and one hand is immediately shot up over here. If you could just wait for the microphone to come to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your fantastic speak, Mrs. Geoghegan-Quinn. I'm Sheila Lane and I work at a charity called Sense About Science. And this is a question about the data protection regulation that you mentioned, and which you said the original draft of which from the Commission probably struck the right balance. It contained an exemption for research sharing, which would allow medical researchers to share personal data under certain safeguards, of course. But the European Parliament's LIBE committee has added amendments to that exemption, which research funders and medical research charities, especially across Europe, tell us could seriously restrict the future of medical research. Will you work to remove that amendment from the regulation?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that we had a very lengthy discussion within the Commission on this whole area, because I think every commissioner wanted to ensure that our proposal was a very balanced one, that we actually listened to the stakeholders, and that what we produced and presented to both the Council of Ministers and the Parliament was a reasoned proposal. And you recognise that, in fact, at the first part of your question. In politics in Europe, there are 3 elements, as you know. The Commission proposes, and then the Council of Ministers and the Parliament take that proposal, they decide they like it, they don't like it, they want to amend it, they want to add to it, and so on. And we engage in that development and that discussion. And that discussion will take place over the coming months. I think it's highly unlikely that I will be the commissioner that actually will be engaged in the final discussions on that particular proposal, or that this commission will be. But I would hope that our successors will faithfully support the proposal that is there, knowing as they will that a lot of discussion went into it and a lot of genuine, serious thought. The Parliament, of course, is an extremely important player in all of this. I think members of the European Parliament have a very crucial role to play now since the Lisbon Treaty. They have, I would have to say, for the most part, in my policy area, taken that role very seriously. We had really good engagement on Horizon 2020, despite the fact that, individual parliamentarians had particular policy niches that they wanted to protect. But I think it will be a lively debate. I'm sure it'll be a very robust debate, but you can be sure that the Directorate General for Research and Innovation, together with the other Directorates General in the Commission, will be watching very carefully and participating very actively in that discussion.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your beautiful presentation. I would like to ask you something about capability of Europe to attract talents from all around the world.
Well, I think one of the discussions that we had over several years in the preparation of Horizon 2020 was all about ensuring that we didn't create a kind of a scientific fortress in Europe that prevented those from outside of Europe from coming in. And what certainly our policy has been in this Commission, and my policy and the Directorate General's policy has been, is to make Europe the place where everyone in the world wants to come to do their science. And we had to make a number of changes in order for that to happen. I think, first of all, we had to simplify. We had a huge burden. I talked a little bit about what André Geim said, but we had a huge burden of bureaucracy and red tape in Europe that needed to be slashed, and we've done that in a radical way. I think member states probably have quite an amount of bureaucracy as well and red tape. I think member states are now looking at all of that in their own political areas, and I know that in Denmark, under Sophie's leadership, that has been done in a very systematic way. But I think, for me, I want to have a landscape in Europe that encourages, excellence from outside to come in. And we have great engagement in the framework programme, in consortia, in proposals. As you know, Horizon 2020 will be the same as each framework programme that went before. It is the most open to the whole world of any programme anywhere in the world. We encourage those from non-EU countries to become involved. We get involved with them. And I think those that are here, whether it's from South Africa or the United States or Canada and other countries, over this week of ESOF will tell you that they want to be part of the programme. We also have made other changes, of course. We've made the process of applying for and receiving your funding much simpler, much faster. I think that's also very important. And so I think there are many changes made within Horizon 2020 that make Europe a very attractive place to do science. And of course, what the European Research Council does is just amazing. I'm always amazed when I go anywhere in the world. The one thing they know about European science is the European Research Council. First of all, it is now regarded as the gold standard for research anywhere in the world. And that has just happened in a short number of years, not even 10 years yet. I think that's a tremendous credit to all of those that have been involved in the setting up of the ERC, but also all of those that have engaged with the ERC and those that have run the ERC, including our newest, Jean-Pierre Bourguignon, who's sitting here in the front. So I think it's a great privilege for me to have been involved with the ERC over the last 5 years, and they're doing a superb job. And of course, if you get an ERC grant, then you come to Europe and you do your research in Europe. I think that's phenomenally good.
So I think actually this is the we've run out of time. I think I also want to say that this is the first time I've been to a session where there's been an all-female lineup and all-female questions from the audience. And I think maybe some of the men are feeling a little shy this morning, or maybe they enjoyed themselves too much at the party last night. I'm not quite sure. Just want to say thank you once again. Good luck in the rest of your mandate in your office. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the Commissioner for a wonderful speech.
Thank you. Thank you.